Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for listening to this session for the K-5 Engineers Conference. I'm so excited that I get a chance to present to you on something that I'm extremely passionate about, and something that I've done in multiple ways. I've done some design challenges with students in classrooms. I've done this with teacher groups, with leader groups, with military organizations. But today I'm really going to tailor it to this K-5 Engineers Conference. And so I hope that you will glean something from this presentation and that it will be something you can use in your instructional practices. So today I'm going to be presenting on leading students through design challenges. My name is Angie Mullennix, and I am the Director of K-12 Academics and Innovation Strategy at the North Carolina Department of Public Instruction. So the first thing that I want to discuss is what exactly is a design challenge? And there are several different definitions of a design challenge, but I tend to lean toward the Stanford D School design thinking process for understanding the components of a design challenge. And you see on the screen there that those include empathizing, defining, ideating, prototypes, and testing. With empathizing, as you see, that can be something such as interviews, in other words, interviewing the customer to understand the needs that the customer has, shadowing a customer, following that person around and understanding where the deficits are, where the gaps are, so that this product could help fill those gaps, seeking to understand, and that comes with asking questions and learning from their perspectives without having any sort of bias or judgment going into that conversation. And probably most importantly is being non-judgmental. You're trying to solve a problem for somebody or an entity or an organization, and you're doing that not to solve your own problems, but to help them solve their problems. The next component is defining. In this component, you really want to take a step from that empathizing into now, how are we going to frame what we've heard into something that we can actually shape and mold into a product or prototype? So you really have to work to define the problem at this point. The next phase is ideating. With ideating here, you're going to want to work within your creative work groups to share ideas, to think about ways that you can now take what you've heard and your definition and start sketching out those ways that you can actually go in and start creating that product or prototype or project. And next comes one of the funnest phases, especially for our students, because this is where they get to work with their hands and they get to create that prototype. You'll hear me interchange the word prototype with product and project. Sometimes I will use them all interchangeably, but they're really the same thing. It's that end goal of showing here, this is our piece of evidence, and this is what is going to help, or ideally help, to solve the problem. And I say ideally because if it doesn't, then at that point, then we go back, and because this is an iterative process, we reshape our thinking with our ideating, we come up with some new ideas, and then we go back to the prototyping and we try it again. Some examples here that the D School provides are mock-ups, storyboards. There are also obviously tangible products that you can create, and I'll give you some examples where you can find those, and student ideas that would lead toward those products. They suggest that you keep it simple and fail fast. That's really important because you've heard of probably fail forward, where you make a mistake, it's okay because we're going to go back, we're going to try it again, and we're going to move forward in that process. And here they also emphasize the purpose of failing fast. In other words, learning that it doesn't work, going back, fixing it, and trying it again. And then testing. And this happens really simultaneously with that iterative process, because once you have the prototype, you test it. And then you go back, you ideate, you prototype, you test again. And so those three will happen in a very iterative process. In the testing phase, I'll also provide to you some ways that you can assess those prototypes in that testing phase, so that students understand where their gaps are and that they know how to go back and adjust for those gaps. So what are design challenge guidelines? It's important that we set guidelines when we're beginning to have some of these design challenges in our schools, because some students might not be used to this way of thinking. According to the Stanford D School, in general, creating a design challenge is a way to initiate a project where students cycle through an entire design thinking process at least once. And I talked about that on the previous slide. This way of using design thinking differs from interjecting individual elements of a process, like prototyping or brainstorming, into a traditional unit. So why do we want to do this? The primary purpose of a design challenge is to set the stage for empathy. It gives students direction and helps instructors to coordinate empathy experiences that contain human needs, right? If we have a factory that is continuously that hires individuals, that invests in a solution to create a product, and that product is never needed by the customer base, then that company is going to go under very quickly, or they're going to have to make adjustments to that product very quickly so that they don't put their employees out of business, so that they don't lose revenue from that product. And in the same way, going back to that empathy phase, that business owes it to their customers to learn of their needs. And so that's why that empathy phase is very important. So we think of design challenges being one of three types: small, medium, and large. Pretty simple. Small challenges are 1 to 2 hour challenges that cycle students through the process. Medium challenges are 1 to 10-day challenges with student teams engaging in multiple cycles that focus on few topics, usually within a discipline. And the last are our large projects, and these are multiple week projects where student teams work on projects that typically span multiple disciplines. Our medium and large types of design challenges are typically going to be seen as part of project-based learning units. So what skills will a design challenge reinforce, right? We want to know that not only are we reinforcing our learning standards, because those are the important components of making sure our students are learning what they need to know, and show that they can be able to show evidence of before they move forward in their grade progression or toward the next standards. But beyond that, design challenges reinforce the 4 C's of 21st century skills: critical thinking, which is finding solutions to problems; creativity, thinking outside the box; collaboration, working with others; and communication, which is conveying ideas. And that graphic there comes from the Applied Educational Systems organization. But you've heard about the 4 C's in various ways, right? We're constantly talking about how we know these are skills that students need to have. And you'll see there in the center, I've added a 5th C because I stand by this 5th C as being just as important and often the result of students learning how to apply the skills needed for these 4 Cs, because once they've learned to be critical thinkers, they're allowed to be creative and fail forward, and that they've learned to collaborate with one another and other groups, and that they can communicate. The end result of all of that is that they have an extremely high, much higher level of confidence. And we can't forget how valuable that is for our students. So again, why the 4 Cs plus 1? Remember, I added that 5th C for confidence. Well, we look here on this graphic, and this graphic shows 3 individuals sitting together with their computers, talking with one another, and engaging with one another, right? Someone's, kind of looks like he's talking. He's got his hand. He's kind of talking with his hands. The other girl is listening. And then the other student is like, oh, I have an idea, so maybe the other student who was talking kind of jogged his thought process. Well, these are our 3 students. We have John, Junior, and Jenna. John has strong writing skills, but he tends to struggle in mathematics. Junior has excellent art skills, but struggles with dyslexia and is strong in STEM subjects. And then we have Jenna. She is new to the area. She's traveled the world because she's a military dependent, and she's multilingual. So the teacher, being strategic in these students' strong skill sets and weak skill sets, put these 3 students together so that they could work with one another and balance each other out, just as we do in the regular workplace, right? We don't work with other teachers and other school leaders that are just like us. We work with individuals that have other skill sets that we don't have, and maybe they have similar skill sets in some ways, but maybe one is stronger than the other. And so we really work to balance one another out with those. So where does a design challenge fit? Design challenges fit within any content area classroom. Cross-curricular typically naturally happens with this, and within any grade level. And what do I mean by that? I mean that design challenges can happen in any content area. They can happen at any grade level. These aren't necessarily only going to happen when the digital integration facilitator can come into the classroom and assist. That's great because those people bring bright ideas and new technologies and innovations to the classrooms that can really help to bring that student engagement to a next level. But these design challenges can happen in any sort of classroom. Now, I want you to think for a moment before we move forward. What are some examples of this in your particular content area? So, for example, if you are ELA, how could you embed a design challenge into your classroom? Maybe you would do it through literature. And I'm actually going to provide a list of some ideas for K-5 for ways that literature could be an area where these design challenges happen. So now we discuss organizing a design challenge. And you see there, I've linked in the standard D-School template for ideas on organization. This is a large template. This is a large template that teachers can use, or they could modify into their own template so that that students have a methodical process as they go through this design challenge. But it doesn't have to be a template. There doesn't have to be that in place. And I'll talk through an example of a way that I've done these design challenges where that isn't a factor. But it is a great template, so I wanted to make sure that I provided that to you. Okay. So now let's actually dive into the main components of these design challenges so that you know what to do as a teacher. As we talked about, the first is empathy and define. We need to make sure that we are prompting our students to understand the problem and empathize and to define the problem. Next, they're going to work on generating possible ideas that can solve the problem. Then they're going to jump into putting thoughts into action and building the prototype or iterating as needed. And finally, they'll test the product or prototype out, present it for feedback, and iterate as needed. Once that whole design challenge process is complete and you're to the test phase, this is where students are going to want to know, how are you assessing this design challenge, right? How are you going to help me know if I have done a good job and I have met the customer's needs, or if I need to go back and I need to correct things? And they may get that throughout the design challenge, but this is the culminating event. This is their final assessment point of this. One way you can do that is through Shark Tanks. With a Shark Tank, you'll have a panel of judges to decide the winner of the challenge. Another way is through peer reviewing. This allows students to review other student groups' projects or prototypes. In both of these ways, you see them linked to an evaluation rubric. An evaluation rubric is really important. The teacher needs to have this clear rubric in place before the students begin, and they should refer to this rubric throughout the challenge. So now let's talk about some actual design challenges to give you some ideas for your own classrooms. Below the examples for your students, you'll see a list of 3 different sources that will take you to some ideas for K-5 students, for remote learning environments, and then also, in case we have any high school teachers in here right now or middle school teachers, there's a great case study article on that 3rd link that will help you to generate some ideas for secondary design challenges. So this is my favorite design challenge. And before our K-5 engineering conference was switched to a virtual setting, this was actually going to be the session in itself, to encourage those participants to walk through the design challenge process as participants. And this is called the Creative Innovator. This is the one that I've referenced before, that I've done with student groups of all levels. I've done with teachers, I've done it with administrators, I've done it with military organizations. This is a really fun way to get people engaged and for them to walk through that designing process naturally, so that they understand what the students will encounter when they are working in these design challenges. So let me sort of paint the picture of what the day would look like when students walk in to the classroom before I dive into the components of this slide. So the teacher is going to have to do some background work to organize this Creative Innovator project. The teacher is going to want to design the task cards, which I'll talk about in a minute, and have those in place. The teacher is also going to want to collect recyclable materials, glue sticks, tapes of different types, all sorts of crafting supplies that you might see in a maker space, and have those all laid about in the back of the classroom or outside in the hallway on a table, randomly just placed about and spread across, so that once all of the students get up and start engaging and making their product, that they are not, on top of one another and things like that. So this is a great time before you get ready to actually do this project to ask your fellow teachers to say, hey, while you're collecting your recyclable materials at home, could you just throw those in a bag for me and bring those to me at school? And when I first learned of this idea, it was from a professional development session that I was actually a member, an attendee at, and the person who was instructing us on this and who was walking us through this said that she, when she was a classroom teacher and she did this, that she would have her students at the very beginning of the year, she asked her students to bring in a trash bag full of recyclable old materials from home. And she had a storage closet, so that was helpful. But she said she encouraged students to bring in old things like VCRs, DVD players that they weren't using, old electronics, just a variety of different things that that might normally get thrown away or put into a dump somewhere, and have the students bring all of those in. And then she had enough supplies that lasted her for quite a while to do these sorts of design challenges. So now that the teacher has done that foundational work, then the students would come into class, and the first thing that the teacher would do is have them all sitting at their desks. And I'm now at the Think and Sketch circle. With the students all sitting at their desks, the students have a piece of paper and a marker or a pencil or whatever the students want to write with. And the teacher says, I would like for you to think of a problem that needs solved at your school. And if the teacher needs to hone this in a little bit more because of the grade level of the students, then that teacher can do that. And if it's for any other sort of organization or leaders or teachers, they can tailor the way that they ask them to sketch out that problem, the specifics for the type of problem. But you can leave it pretty general, as I have here. So the students sketch that out, give them about maybe 5 minutes to do that. Then you're going to put students in groups. And here's where the teacher can be very strategic, as I mentioned before, with the students, the 3 different students that had the J names, working together so that they balanced one another out. So the teacher puts the students in the groups, and maybe the teacher does it randomly, or maybe the teacher does it in a strategic sort of way. Once the students are in groups, the teacher says, okay, now what you're going to do is you all have your drawings. You're going to choose. You can either select one of those drawings, and that can be your one target focus, or you can merge them in together for one combined product prototype. It's up to you to decide. So she gives the students about a minute to discuss, right? Not too much time. So the students discuss, and the teacher says, okay, now that you've had a chance to decide how you're going to go forward, the next thing you're going to do is you're going to go out to the supplies that are already placed in the hallway or at the back of the classroom, and you have 20 minutes to build your product or prototype. And the teacher keeps the timer visible so that the students can see it the whole time, and they begin working. About 12 minutes, 13 minutes into the design challenge, the teacher says, and it's up to the teacher, because if the students seem to kind of start slowing down around 8 to 10 minutes, then maybe that's the good point to do the task cards. But somewhere in that mid-range, the teacher says, all right, I would like for all group leaders to come to me. And the students obviously have not selected group leaders. So this is one challenge they have to do as a group. They have to figure out who is going to be that leader amongst themselves. And there will be some chatter of students saying, well, you didn't tell us who the leader was. You didn't say who the leader was. The teacher should just say, I know, go ahead and have your leader come to me. And so the students will figure it out that they need to designate somebody to come to the teacher. Once they get to the teacher then has an envelope with those task cards in it and randomly gives one task card out to each group leader. The students will read the task card and then they will do what the task card says. And on the next slide, I'm going to explain some ways that you can design those task cards that kind of makes it fun and interesting and sort of shakes things up a little bit. So the students do that with their task cards and the teacher says, okay, continue working. And then at the 20-minute mark, the teacher calls time and the students sit back at their desks and await their turn at presenting their product or prototype to the sharks. And the sharks can be teachers, community members, and so forth. And this is a typical Shark Tank, just as you've seen on the TV show. So some task card ideas. This is where it gets really fun. So my favorite task card is the switcheroo. So with the switcheroo, I typically will have a picture of a red car and on one card, and then I'll have an identical task card that looks just like that with a red card. And on both task cards, it will say, find the group leader who has the same task card as you, and without talking, switch products and continue working. So if I am the student who gets the task card with the red car and sees that, I've got to go find the other student who has the other task card that looks just like that. I've got to take my product from my group, take it over to the other person. We switch, we don't talk, and I go back to my group. And at that point, we have to decide, do we continue trying to make this product what we were doing originally, or do we try to figure out what the other group was doing and go forward with that thought process? So that's up to the students to decide. That's one of my favorite. That one, of course, requires 2 identical task cards and the language on it to explain. Another task card I like is a delay of game. For this task card, it will just say, students must sit out and halt work on their project for 2 minutes. Now, the teacher has to make sure that they're keeping track of that time for the 2 minutes. So having an assistant in this part might be really beneficial. And then once the group has sat out for 2 minutes, and I typically don't put on there without talking, because I like to see if the students assume they can't talk or if they use that time to think about their project and make it better. Because what you'll notice is the students who have the 2 minutes and they use that time to talk will actually come out with a better product in the end than some of the other student groups, because these students dive right in and they start working on their product without spending time communicating about what they're doing, why they're doing it, and how to make it the best that it can be. So that one's a fun one. The last one is silence, please. Students cannot talk to one another when they get this task card. It says students cannot talk to one another within their groups for the remainder of the 20 minutes. So if I'm a student and I get this task card, I take it back to my classmates, my student group, and I say, okay, guys, we're done. We can't talk anymore. So they have to continue building their product without communicating to one another, which can also be really interesting to watch. And you'll learn a lot about your students during these task card switcheroos. And now, after bringing that project to light, I just want to point out something that is so important for us to remember as educators. No matter if we're in the classroom, we are facilitators for we're school leaders, we're district leaders, state leaders, it doesn't matter. We have to remember that creativity now is as important in education as literacy, and we should treat it with the same status. And that was from the late Sir Ken Robinson. I want to thank you for this short and sweet session that you have listened to today. While I wish I could have done this with you in person, and I apologize for switching screens at some points during this project, I just want to encourage you that if you have questions on how this could be done, that you reach out to me. My email is Angie.Mullennix, I'm sorry, ANGIE.Mullennix@dpi.nc.gov. And just let me know if you have questions, and I'll be happy to walk you through how to do the Creative Innovator or any other design challenge that you're doing. I also love site visits, so if you happen to be doing these in your classrooms, please don't hesitate to reach out. I love to come and watch and just observe and enjoy, and I hope that when COVID has calmed down that we have a better opportunity to do that, but please keep me in mind. And then also something that I know you're eager to learn more about is how to earn your CEUs. Please make sure you click on that bit.ly link and it will take you to a Google form where you will see here, you can fill that out to earn your CEUs. Again, thank you so much. I appreciate your time and I hope you have a great day.